My name is Jennifer Rivera. I am on the marketing team, newsletter team, and program committee of Virtual Collab. Here at Virtual Collab, we believe in creating a virtual community where minds can grow by sharing knowledge, skills, and resources through newsletters, virtual discussions, and webinars. Questions can be answered at the end of our Q&A portion, but feel free to ask throughout the presentation on the chat. We ask that you maintain your audio off and video is optional. This will be recorded and you'll be able to access an edited version on our website and on our YouTube channel. I am excited to introduce our speaker. Atalia Cardenas, a resident of Lexington, North Carolina since 1995, where she calls home, a wife, a mother of 3 young boys, ages 11, 5, and 3, a career woman. Graduated from High Point University in International Business Administration, while she was simultaneously attending for Site Tech for her paralegal studies. Currently, she is seeking her MBA from Wake Forest University. She is the class of 2021. Currently, she works for Collins Aerospace, a Raytheon Technologies company, as a compliance manager and data privacy professional. She has been the chair for the Latino Village for the annual Multicultural Festival and was a Volunteer of the Year in 2015. A board member with United Way of Davidson County Civic Center Board of Directors, Lexington Housing CDC board member, and Davidson County Community Action board member. She also serves on the Latino Council Board with Novant Health Hospitals, where she had participated in different campaigns. She also has a partnership with the local community college to help bridge the gap between the Latinx community needs and the services that they offer. You can also find her in the book called Inspiring Davidson County by Caleb Zink. What a mouthful. It was a small part of her bio, and with further ado, our guest, Atalia Cardenas. Welcome.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here. I appreciate you inviting me.
Can you please explain to us the compliance manager data privacy professional title?
Yes, so to put it in layman's terms, I deal with everything that has to do with anti-bribery and risk assessments for third parties for our company. So our company is Collins Aerospace. We are a 40 billion company, global company, huge company with about 195,000 employees. I am part of the Collins Aerospace unit, SBU business unit, and I am in a team of 6 people that are part of the compliance group. We basically vet every single, like sales representatives, like when you sell, because what we do in products for our company is everything that you can think of in a plane, like from the lights to the front end of the plane, the seats, the carpet, the restrooms, the microwaves, everything that you see on a plane. So we have these third parties that they help us secure different pursuits and programs with different airlines around the world. So there is a lot of risk with that because, in some countries, they're more corrupt than others. They can slip money under the table. So you have to vet all of these companies because if they are caught doing some wrongdoing, the company's liable and we could end up with big fines over the years. So that's one part of it. And it's a small part that I'm mentioning. It's a lot of different little things, but that's basically the gist of it. And in terms of data privacy, I help manage I'm responsible for a part of the business unit of Collins Aerospace in terms of understanding data privacy laws around the world and implementing the data privacy program, which means basically, taking care of data for our employees, our contractors, and anybody that we come in contact with. I also help with audits in that sense, and I'm learning. I've been a data privacy professional for the last 3 years, and I've been in compliance for about 7. And then prior to that, I was a corporate paralegal. So I've always been in Fortune 500 companies where I started my corporate career.
That's a mouthful. And I know that at the beginning of you switching companies, I believe that you were traveling internationally, right? And
Yes. So that was really a really gratifying experience, because one of the things that I always wanted to do is, you sit on airplanes and you kind of see all these people that are like coming by, and they're like business, and they're like taking out their laptops. And I remember when I was very young, I used to look at them and say, one day I want to travel like that. And, thank God, I was able to get this. I used to work at Hanes Brands. Hanes Brands Inc. is one of the companies that does all of, like, maybe you're familiar with Champion. They own that brand, and various brands like that, like anything that has to, like the tagless tees, those Michael Jordan commercials, they own that. So I used to work in their legal department as a paralegal. And then when I joined this company, Collins Aerospace, it was totally different. I went from t-shirts to planes. So that was really, but I was fortunate because I had a great mentor as my manager, my boss, who really helped me through all of this. I remember when I was interviewing for that position, I was up against like an FBI agent and, this other like very like decorated police officer, because you're supposed to do interviews and go on, travel internationally to these sites to look at to actually do the interviews face to face with the third parties that I was talking about, right? And you have to like question them and, kind of like develop that part of it to understand what they're saying and making sure that they're not lying to you. So my former manager, when I joined, he was the Department of Justice. He was the prosecutor for the Department of Justice here in Charlotte.
okay,
And, it was an awesome, like, I kid you not, when I interviewed with him, I looked him up. I learned as much as I could about him, so that when he asked me the questions, I was prepared, because I was very intimidated by that, like, I'm like, oh my God, and he used to be he actually lived in Turkey as the ambassador for the United States. So I was like, wow, trying to live up to that. But he taught me a lot as being a manager. He was also a person, and he was so giving and understanding and taught me so many things. So when I started traveling, we traveled like within the US. I traveled to Mexico. I had the opportunity to go to Brazil. And then I also had the opportunity to do a European tour with my data privacy role. And that was like very, very, like, it was amazing. And it was one of the best experiences I've ever had.
And I just want to remind everybody, she was traveling internationally. She has 3 kids. She's an active member from church. Like, this woman is amazing. Like, and I'm so glad to see women from our community and those corporate positions, as we should. Like, and I'm glad that you're using your experience to mentor younger people. And I want to remind everybody, I'm going to read a little bit so you guys can see what I'm talking about. You are on all these boards, like it's the long list that you guys heard at the beginning: a community leader, a mother. I remember you go to the football games. I know that for sure. An NBA candidate. You're an active member of the Light of the World Church, serving as a secretary for the past 19 years and the membership director for the 9 years. How do you do it? Can you tell us your secret?
Well, I love staying engaged. I have a lot of passion for everything that I do. When I was little, my mom always used to tell me that I should put passion in everything that I did. From, I didn't have to have a fancy job. I could be, I actually cleaned offices with my parents because they owned a cleaning business. And I often sat there and wondered, well, one day I'm going to be in one of those offices, right? And I remember my mom used to like take pride, and my parents always used to say, take pride in everything you do, even if it's picking up trash. Pick up the trash with pride and make sure that you do it the best that you can do it. So like for me, and also within church, the instilling of the love for everything that you do and helping your community, it's one of the best rewarding experiences for me. Like the reward is like being able to help, understanding, learning, because like with these boards, I learned so much information. I put it all here in my brain. Sometimes when my brain gets a little exhausted because you have to put all this in, and you say, well, I met this person and maybe it could help this other person, and I could potentially help this other person. And, you kind of start putting two and two together. And then with my kids, right? I want to show them by walking the walk about what I'm doing, so that when I, start telling them, we need to do this, they kind of see my example. And of course, like none of this could be done if I didn't have an amazing husband either that was supportive of every one of my craziness throughout the whole time that we've been together. So it's, we divide and conquer, we try to do, our kids are extremely active in a lot of different things. They're active in sports. I try to be active within their schools, as much as I can. And then my husband does a lot of that part as well. And then in the boards, it's just basically, what drives me is meeting people all the time. Like, it's like they make an impression on me, and that I actually learn from them. Like maybe 5 seconds that I see them, it's like also, taking a little bit of them with me. So it kind of drives me, and it kind of gives me that same passion to continue.
Okay, so let's take it back to the beginning. If you can show us your steps, let's retrace your steps. Can you tell us, how did you start? Like, I know, let's start with the city government. How did you start working with them?
Okay, so it's been a long time in the making, right? One of the things I'm very passionate about is helping the youth understand the channels of education. When I got here, I was here like when in the second semester of my 10th grade year. My parents have just come from Mexico, maybe the second time, but they had been to college a little bit over there. But it's very different, right, from Mexico to here in the way that you do things and all the channels they have to go through. I feel that I didn't really have the support in the school administration when I went off to college the first time. And certainly, the amazing network that now exists with all of this, wow, it's priceless. And like for me, it's like telling them, hey, you have all of this. You should all be successful because you have everything at your fingertips. And just, that passion that built within me, in terms of like starting the project that we had at church about 9-10 years ago, where we wanted to kind of take all that youth and see where we were, right? And the beginnings, as you might remember, a lot of them didn't even go to school, so we started with that. Hey guys, it's important that you attend classes. It's important that you get up to go to school. And because their parents were just busy trying to make ends meet, right? And they're not, they weren't able, that part wasn't that important at that time. And it took a lot of talking. And then when we got to a point that we were able to kind of see, hey, there's a lot of different opportunities out there for youth to kind of start growing. In my corporate career, I learned a lot about the community service and how do you navigate those channels. Like when I was at Hanes Brands, one of the things that I remember learning, Hanes Brands is it's big into community where there are at. They partner with Habitat for Humanity, they partner with the United Way, they partner with a lot of different nonprofits where you volunteer as a corporate employee to go and attend these things. So I started learning a lot about that, and I really liked it. I joined the youth program that they have for the United Way, and I was the vice chair, and I was chair 1 year, and then I would get involved in all these initiatives on my job that I wanted to be that model employee, not only just doing my job, because the way that jobs work today, you can't just be good at your job. You have to be a good citizen of the company. And that involves doing your job, but in addition to, you have to do all these things. So learning about all the community engagement, when we started the youth program, I was like, we need to create these opportunities for these youth. I didn't work in the town that I live in, and I've never, ever worked in the town that I've lived in. I don't have any work related anything. So I had to start from scratch because I didn't own a business and I was like basically no one in the community. So one of the things that served me well is my education and the position that I held in these companies. Because when I went to meet people, it was like, I'm Atalia Cardenas. I work for Hanes Brands and I do this. And in addition to that, I belong to this church here that we have all of this potential volunteers that you all need all the time. Because people always say, we need volunteers. Nobody cares about the community, blah, blah, blah. So I'm like, we have all of this. So I remember having a conversation one time where I started in the Multicultural Festival. So, there was a member of our church that kind of started that, and she couldn't continue it, and I kind of jumped in. And I was like, okay, now we're supposed to put this Latino village together and bring in, our flavor of like what, Hispanic culture is or Latinx community now, and make sure that it's not only Mexicans or Salvadorians, but making sure that people understood. So we started with that. That's when, I got the that awesome recognition of being the volunteer of the year on that, which I was like blown away. And it was at that moment where I started understanding city government. Like I really did not. I wasn't a political science major or anything like that. And my parents haven't been into politics and all this stuff, but I started learning, hey, so who are the key players? And I remember the mayor of the city was there at that event. And what I started doing, the way I started is I went over to that table, I introduced myself, and I said, this is who I am. And he probably doesn't remember that because I had to introduce myself at least 10 more times in different events, that I started to figure out where they were, how they, because they can't just say, oh, you're Atalia, yeah, I'm a citizen and they're going to care about me, but they need to know who I am really for them to invest their time in me. And that is not something that happens overnight. That is something that is continuous. And they have to see you out in the community, not only just saying, I want to do this. And the way that I think I made the connection with them was my philosophy is more about what can I do for my community rather than going to the mayor and saying, what can you do for me? How much money can you give me? What benefits can you give me? Because I'm part of this community and we have to make the community work together. And I think that's a philosophy that has served me well through all this time, thank the Lord. And it's worked because when I started having these conversations and, we started having events at church and I would say, hey, come and meet us. They wanted to, because where we live, so just to give you like a little idea, we're in the South, right? This is Lexington, North Carolina. This is a city that is about 20,000 people registered in the census, in the last census, which is really more like 35,000. But, during that time when I started here, I graduated from high school in 1997. Not too long ago. I mean, it is long ago, but not too long ago that you could say that it's like half a century or anything. But I was one of only 3 Hispanics in the whole school. And nobody knew what we were because there weren't a lot of Hispanics here in Lexington. So fast forward it, the city grew really fast. Now we have, our church particularly has about 200 kids in the school system, which is a lot, only from our church. And there's many more. And, the community grew so fast that they didn't know what to do with it and they don't know how to approach it. And then we, in turn, don't know how to approach them because we normally, Hispanic people, we live in our own little silos. We don't want to get out of our comfort zones because that's what we know. And it's not wrong. It's just the fact that, but they don't know how to enter. So there has to be a bridge between those people because you're supposed to be trying to go towards them and then they're coming to you to kind of see how they can include you. You can't just sit there and say, I wonder when they're going to include me, and you do nothing. It's not going to work. So, and then also you have to get rid of all these biases that people have about Hispanics, right? Do they drink a lot? Do they just get into accidents? They work all the time. There's 15 people living in a house, that sort of thing. Because, and they don't, most of the people, it's not malicious. They just ignore what they don't know. Back to 1997, I was in a class of 4 people, and they asked me if my favorite food was Taco Bell, or if my dad wore a sombrero, because at that time, that's all they knew. But I couldn't really say, oh my God, they're disrespecting me. They were just ignorant, just like I am ignorant in some things, and you just have to take the time to learn. So, in terms of building the community relationships with the city and the council and the mayor and the city manager, it's like a lot of years in the making, where, I remember having a conversation with the mayor, and they were like, well, how do we bridge that gap between the Hispanics and try to bring them in, and how do we serve them better? Because at the end of the day, they live in the city. And I remember having that opportunity where one of our students, we were discussing like year-round school, and I had asked them, I said, do you want to prepare like a speech from the student part of it and kind of give it out? First of all, I did that as a test because I wanted to see what this young man was capable of, because you can't just endorse anyone with your name, because you have to take care of those relationships that are really, really hard to make. And I remember him coming, he asked me what he needed to wear. He asked me, a lot of stuff that I thought it was important, that I was really proud that he did. And then when I saw him get up there, he stuttered a lot, but his ideas were in the right place. And I was like, this is a kid that can be taken, can be polished, and he can be grown into something else. And I remember saying, do you have the good grades? We had a conversation, and I had found out about an opportunity with the city council, which is they have a youth city council. So high school students are able to be part of government by that. But how do you join this city council? You know how? You have to have the endorsement of one of the city council members. So how do we get the city council members to endorse us if they don't know us? How do we get our kids there? How do we get representation if nobody's willing to make those relationships where I say, I vouch for him and he should be put in this youth city council? And I remember I asked him and I said, are you ready? And he said, yeah, well, I'll try or whatever. And I emailed the mayor, and I emailed all of the city council members, and I said, I know you've been talking about how you bridge that gap. Here's your opportunity. This is an amazing young man. He has the great grades. He has all this stuff. You can ask his teachers. Here's his application. Somebody needs to appoint him. And I will tell you, that same day, about, in the afternoon, I got a call from one of the city council members that can appoint at large. And he said, I'm appointing him. But because relationships are powerful. But they can't just be like, you can't just be sitting out there and saying, it's my right to be on the youth city council. But do you have any backup? Do you have, what do you have? Who is in your corner? And like people like me, that we have that knowledge. You ask me what drives me. My passion is that it's my responsibility, because I feel like if I keep it all, God is going to take all of it away, and I'm going to be left with nothing, because you have to recognize your talents. And what are your talents? My talent is probably building the relationships, building that gap, and helping others to become what they want to be at a very, very, very early age. So like with the Youth City Council, that's what I did. And I continued to have conversations. I learned, because I was very ignorant. Like probably you guys know so much more than I did at your age, like in terms of like how a city is organized and who you needed to contact. Why is it so important that you vote for them? Why is it important that they know you? There's so many different things, like with the city manager. I had a relationship over the years. She was the assistant city manager. And when she became the city manager, she was the first woman city manager in the history of our town. And when she got called in, which was last year, she wanted to take the census to the next level. How do we get all of these Hispanic families to be part of the census? And you know what she did? She called me to her office and asked me my thoughts. Like, for me to be sitting in a city manager's office, I mean, it's not, I know that sometimes it's a very small town, but that's where you start. Like, I mean, building the relationships, you know, they see your work, they see that you're not fluff, because a lot of people can be so much fluff, but they don't have any substance. And what's going to get you through everything is the substance that you bring. But, you know, for me to be sitting there going, okay, you invited me here to hear my thoughts about how we can help you to bridge that gap so we can get the Hispanic community to be counted. I mean, to me, that was like one of the things, one of the first places where I was like blown away. I couldn't even believe it. When I'm sitting there, sometimes I'm like, how exactly did I get here? So it's that's kind of like the journey that I've taken.
And also to add to that, I think this is our election year for the mayor status. Like, would you like to say, like, some candidates have actually reached out to you to talk about it? Like, would you like to say something about that?
So yes, and that's been something that kind of blows me away as well, because there is a potential candidate that actually reached out to me, and he's like, I don't know you. And one of the things that he told me, and this is something that he's told me over the past 2 weeks, we've had a couple calls. He's like, I don't know you, but I feel like I need to know you because everyone I talk to in the city mentions your name. So you must be somebody that I need to get to meet. And I, you know, I mean, personally, of course, it makes me feel great because, you know, it's accomplishing the goal of why we're doing it. You know, the whole idea is to bring people together, for them to know that, you know, we bring so much to the table, that we have so many talented people, and that we can bridge that gap. And he's asking me, hey, how like the first call that we had, it was like he wanted to learn about me. And, you know, I'm very open. That's another thing that I think it's very important. You have to be yourself everywhere, the same. Of course, you have to tone down your, you know, sometimes your passion, because sometimes I admit I'm a little overwhelming to certain people, and I have to make sure that I can tone it down a little bit according to my audience. But I'm still the same person. Like if you go to my job, I'm that person. If you go to church and you see me interact there, I'm the same person. If I go to city government, I'm the same person. I don't have time to be keeping different faces, because that's just very exhausting, and it's not going to be good in the end. But he reached out to me. He asked me, what is going well? Help me learn about the community. What can we do better if I was elected? And, you know, having those powerful conversations to me were really, really gratifying. Like, I told him, I said, I don't know how I got here. And, you know, one of the things he said is like, I do know how you got there, you know, based on the stuff that you're telling me, this is how you got there. And, you know, like I was telling you earlier, probably is you have to sit back and enjoy. That's one of the things probably is one of my biggest flaws. I don't know how to enjoy the journey, because I'm always looking at the next thing that I'm doing. And that's always been my entire life. So, you know, I would say that you always should enjoy that journey.
You should. We gone from the mayor, the city council members, the Parks and Recreation Department, which is the Multicultural Festival. We would like to say, like, the fire department. What events have you done with them? What connections do you
Yeah,
make?
so I also learned all about how the fire department is, you know, the way that it's established. You know, like, what's the fire marshal? Who's the fire chief? Why are they important? So, like, you know, those things have been really, like, I've learned so much. Like, sometimes I have so much information here in my brain that I'm like, I know what you're talking about. And, you know, it's just like, you have to calm down. But like, sometimes with the fire department, we've been able to do campaigns where they've asked us to help them to provide volunteers so they can go into the areas where a lot of the Hispanics live, so that they can help them with their fire alarms, because they're free, and they can help them to make sure that they're safe. And they understand and they recognize that just them going there might scare a lot of people off. So they understand that they need people like us to kind of, that look like those people, to kind of like bridge that gap and for them to feel comfortable when we come into their home. So we've had a couple very, very successful ones. They always also reach out to us and they say, how can we get people from the Hispanic community to become firefighters? And they're in desperate need. They want to have somebody bilingual. They want to see how they can reach out to the community to make sure that they know about their program. Like, here, there is a program now in the high school where you can actually have a certification. And it's powerful because imagine you earn your certification, you go straight to be a firefighter, you have incredible benefits, they pay for the rest of your school. They're a great bunch of people. They're so different. It's like a very, very fun time to be around them. And they've even participated in some campaigns that we've had along with the city police, where they come to our church and we'll do like, there's a national night out that is like throughout the whole U.S. And we've always participated with them in terms of like volunteers, and we've had some youth come over and they help them like serve hot dogs or whatever for that day. And what they did this last year, well, the year before, is that they wanted to take those national night outs into the communities, and we were one of those hubs. And they would come, the firefighters, with the city police, with different people, and we got to the point where we are comfortable. Our members are comfortable, the community feels comfortable, because at the end of the day, they're helping us keep safe, but we have to trust them, and they have to know that we trust them with our safety. And I think when they know that we care and they care, it's a more powerful relationship. Like even when we went to, where we've had our events somewhere and we leave our churches for a long time, we were able to go and leave them a letter and say, hey, can you patrol our church or, our neighborhood while we're away? We're not going to be here. And they did that. And, participating in things like that, I think it's very powerful, but it can't be just a one-time thing. It has to be constant, and you have to be there all the time. And sometimes, people just don't have that because they don't want to spend the time. Like you asked me about all these boards. Do I have the time? No, I don't have the time to be sitting in a 2-hour board meeting every week or every month. But you have to make the time because people in our communities are benefiting from all of these services. So when they complain about not receiving the right help or the right services, it's because we're not at that table where they're making the decisions. So it's a responsibility to be at that table, to be a voice. And, over the years, it's even grown even bigger, like it started with church, right? And now it's like the whole community. And if the whole community benefits, church benefits automatically. It's not just about that part, but it's about the whole entire community. Like I've met people, like kids in different events where they need to volunteer. And sometimes if I'm struggling to find volunteers, I'll frankly say, hey, you want to join in with us? We have different volunteering opportunities, and they've come. And it's now bigger than anything. It's grown into something so different that I would have never imagined myself at this point.
And going down the line, so we have covered the city government, the mayor, the city council, the Parks and Recreation Department, the fire department, and you mentioned that we had the National Night Out at church, and we were actually the only church. Everybody was like in parks, and we were like the only ones. Would you like to tell everybody about how the relationships that you made with police department and the sheriff department?
Yeah, so because we were actually like the only church, Hispanic, not Hispanic pub. Everything else, like Jenny said, they were held at parks. But they've seen our involvement by, like either our youth, volunteering in different activities to, you being the constant face there. Like they have to see you everywhere around because that's when they're going to remember who you are. If they just see you one time and you worked through really hard that one event, it's a one-time occurrence and people will forget that. But if they see you all the time in all these different things, you know, I used to tell Jenny, you have to say yes all the time at the beginning. And then once you get to that point, then you get to pick what you want to do, and where you want to spend your efforts. And then you have people like Jenny that are part of your network that you've mentored, and you say, you know, I can't be there, but she can. She can take over this. And putting the different people, because you can't do it all yourself. I mean, like, definitely you cannot. But like with the fire police and the fire and the police department, you know, it's been an ongoing thing. Like, you know, we'll circle up with them, like in our community meetings, community watch meetings that we used to have, like at the church every month. We used it was a very difficult relationship to build, because, you know, I came up with the idea that it was great that the city police is going to come, you know, after our service, come join us. And people are like, why? You know, they're going to come and get us, and they're going to do all this stuff to us. And, you know, there's the fear, because it's a natural fear. And I did understand that, right? But building that, like, you know, having them come, like, I remember the one of the incidents that happened is that, okay, I got everybody convinced to come, you know, hey, come over here. And they would talk about like very good topics, right? Like, a lot of brothers and sisters have like benefited extremely about this, because they learned about, like, if they come to their house, what can they do? If this is happening to them, what can they do? Or who they can contact. But I remember the one thing that happened is that after that one meeting, there was a stopping block, you know, in a stoplight, in a stop sign before church, where, you know, they put the cop car there, and they kind of, you know, see everybody's IDs. And I remember everybody coming to me and saying, see, I told you this is what happened. We can't do this because they're doing this to us. So I had to go and talk to them, to the police department, and say, I understand that what you're doing may not be connected to this at all, but this is what it looks like to the community that I'm trying to build trust around. And then, you know, in turn, you have to go back to the church or like the people and say, it's not like that. You have to give it another chance. You have to, you have to, there's no other way. And, you know, building that relationship over the years, where that's where I started to meet the chief of police, and I didn't even know who he was. And he would come to these meetings, and I thought he was just another police officer, because I don't know the ranks in the police department. You know, I would call somebody officer, and they're lieutenants, or, you know, officers, or all this stuff, and learning just about that. You know, and forming those relationships where just constant talking, where, you know, in this case, there was another case where I was invited to talk to it was the chief of police, it was the city manager, and the mayor, where they were talking about bringing what it's called the Faith ID program. You know, in a lot of communities, they have it, where they have this ID that if people don't have IDs, you know, they can get this through this nonprofit. And I was invited to talk because the mayor really wanted to help the community that didn't have those IDs, to bring them to the town. So one of the things, instead of just bringing the IDs and just giving them out, is a strategic planning meeting, where it was like, what is the purpose of this ID? So if the police stops you, are they going to recognize it? If you go to a hospital, are they going to recognize it? You know, like different things that you can use it for. And I learned, like, yet again, I was super ignorant about the Faith IDs, and yet I learned something new. And I learned the importance of people, because I didn't have those challenges growing up, about, like, you know, being afraid of your identity here and who you were and that kind of stuff. But I know a lot of people that have. So, like, you know, imagine not having an identification to say who you are to people. That's really terrifying, because they won't know who you are. So having the importance of this thing, we started like talking about strategically, hey, chief of police, are you going to recognize this ID if it comes? And you know, they're like, well, I don't understand that. So trying to figure out more information, where that project is starting to take off in another direction, because I recently had, you know, we couldn't go ahead and go through with it, because last year we had the pandemic, and it was just like that was at the middle of the stuff that we were doing. And I recently met the director of that nonprofit, and she explained to me like the more the benefits that this could happen, that this idea is not only for people that can't have identification, it's like for the elderly, for people that come out of prison and don't have, like, they can't go get an identification, it's a lot of different things. And now it's taking it's another project in the making that we'll be working on, bridging that community and bringing it together. But I also had the opportunity to go talk to the sheriff's office to talk about this. Now, you got to understand, the sheriff's department is a very different deal than the city police, because, they have other resources that normally the city police does not have. And having these conversations, with them, and not saying it, but using the words and saying, hey, what's going to happen if I'm in the county and somebody pulls me over? And they're like, but why can't you just get an ID? That kind of conversation. And you have to be so careful about what you're saying and how you're saying it in order to get that buy-in. But, going back, it's like about the relationships, because even the mayor and I had a previous meeting, and he said, let's get our heads together. This is what we want at the end of the day. And having that constant communication, if I have a question about something, I'll ask them, like with the whole census thing. I was also very ignorant of that area. I had no idea why it was so important for census. And the opportunity that I was given to be part of a group of people that the city manager kind of brought together to bring, thoughts into the community and educating people within your community in a series of different events. Like sometimes I didn't have time for these events, but I have to make the time in order for them to see that I'm serious. And that means that sometimes you have to sacrifice something, maybe your sleep, but, they have to see you there. And that's how you build those relationships. At least that's how I have done it. It's them seeing you constantly, like, these boards. I was invited by the mayor to join the Community Action Board, which is a federal agency that is like very powerful and impactful, right? And you are a board member who you have this, the way that you can make a difference in their programs, or like the United Way board. How do these nonprofits get allocated money to their programs that a lot of us have benefited from, at some point in our lives? The Civic Center board. I'm on a Civic Center board. I'm not an arts person at all, but I know people that I can bring in possibly at some point, and they can give their own take. I'm there to give them a different perspective of what I see. The Lexington Housing Authority, that's a different board, and that's very, I'm learning a whole lot. And then just the Latino Council for like the Novant, that one has been very powerful, because I was invited to join them as to kind of like see how we can bridge into the community, like in a lot of different things. I'm not a nurse. I don't work in any of those areas, but I'm helping them to bring birthing classes to people. I've worked in several masking events, when we were doing the whole mask thing, to help the Hispanic community understand the importance of a mask and why you have to wear it. And I got to tell you, we were outside of a store where it was a Hispanic store, and we gave out about 300 to 500 masks in about 2 hours, and educating them in that. And we've had like a couple of events. We're going to have another one pretty soon here where we're going to give out masks, but we're also going to talk about the importance of the vaccine and kind of like help people understand why, because we're in those communities that are not getting those vaccines, because, the way that sometimes it's done, it's really hard for like, a Hispanic person there to sit on the phone, and it's at 10 in the morning when the registration opens, and I'm just going to give up because, I just don't know how to do that. And I'm not going to go on the internet to be able to do that. So we have to kind of bring that to a close and help them through that. And then I I was invited to do a campaign on advanced directives, the importance of having conversations with your families. And, I had a story that happened to me with my dad, and the importance about having those conversations, because it's so unfair to leave your families with the decisions, right? If something happens, and just at least, knowing what you think, just opening this up. And I ended up in a video for a campaign that they're doing across North Carolina, where I'm sharing my story in both English and Spanish, because they thought that maybe somebody like me, if somebody sees me, they're going to be like, oh, I can, relate to that person. Oh, I should be having this conversation. It's uncomfortable, and all this stuff. But it was a great experience. And I met so many different people along the way for so many different reasons. So I've been just grateful to continue to meet great people in the world. And then with the community college, that was something very powerful as well. I mean, they have the continuing education program, and they reached out to me to see how I can help them, because they're looking at their plan and they're looking at their current student body, and it doesn't reflect the community. And they're wondering how they can make that happen, how they can get the Hispanic community to come and join into the community college, because they know that if that doesn't happen, they're not going to be there long, especially because our community is growing so much. So like helping them identify, individuals that are going to, either help to start their business, and they're going to be part of a small business, helping them with different classes to get filled. The Spanish classes, we had a group of ladies at our church that were going to be taking advantage of this, and they did, and it was so great. But, and they were buying into the whole vision of like, I am going to at least learn how to read the papers that come in for my children, in the thing. And they would come, and I had to, it's like selling the idea, like you have to put in the hard work, and it's not going to happen overnight. I'm talking about a 2 years long project. And even within our members of the community, they were going to start like a caring class, like a basic CNA class, what's before a CNA. And within our membership, we already had identified one of our own that came through our program that she was going to be able to teach that class to them, through those channels. Because it's like what I was telling you before, it's not about knowing everything, it's about knowing people that can do things. And, they were struggling to find like a person that could teach it in Spanish that would be, I'm able to come at these times. And I was like, well, we have one. And it was great. She was going to be able to do it. So bringing those things in and looping them in and getting people to come and buy into your vision, it's one of the most powerful things now. It doesn't always happen, and you have to take your losses, and you have to identify your focus. And that's been a growing experience for me, because I was one that I was like, I have 40 kids here. The 40 shall do the same. But it's not going to happen. You can help them to understand, but you can't make people care.
And I love that you invested in a lot of kids, and you saw the potential. And now we see a big group of students now in college, and now we have to turn that and make themselves into mentors. It's a circle. And I'd say, because I was one of those students as well. As I would love to everybody say, if we can run down one more time, it's the city government, the mayor, the city council, the Parks and Recreation Department, the fire department, the police department, the sheriff's department, Department of Health, the community college, the networks of the hospitals as well, and the statewide campaigns that you have been part of. You are an amazing person. I'm so glad that you're a friend of Virtual Collab. And if you would like to say like an advice to everybody who's watching.
Yeah, I would just say that do everything that you do with passion. Think of it as the thing that you love the most. When you do things without interest of gaining something back, believe me, it's like the best feeling in the world. My mom always used to tell me, if you're going to do something for someone, do it and don't expect anything back. And do it because you want to, and do it because you care, but do it because it's your responsibility. And it is a responsibility. Every one of us has a responsibility because we're blessed to have our careers. We're blessed to have our studies, those of us that have our studies. We're blessed to have our businesses. If you didn't get to go to school, it doesn't mean that you don't have a contribution. It's just that is the path that you took, and that is the best path for you. What my path doesn't necessarily mean that it's your path. I can help you tell you about how I got to my path, but you have to decide what is your path. I'm passionate about other people. I love seeing people grow. I always told them, like, and Jenny could attest to this, the one thing that I always used to tell them all the time is, like, you shouldn't be like me. You should be 10 times better than me because you're learning all of these tools at such a young age that if you take them in and you understand them, the sky is the limit. Plus, we're children of God, and we're destined for success. If you are not successful, it's because we're standing in the middle of in our success. If you're not successful, it's not because God doesn't want you to be. It's because you're standing in front of that success. And sometimes it's scary because with a lot of success and a lot of this stuff that you read right here, in this piece of paper that you read, comes a lot of responsibility. You can't just pretend that you are and you're not, because people will see through you and people will know whether you're fake or you're not. And when you're fake and you don't do things because you feel them in your heart and because God gave you that God-given virtue, it's not going to work. You're only going to be in the stardom for a little while, but in order for you to prolong that and help others come up through the same channels and get them better, always listen, right? Listen to, because the generations change. I used to, and Johnny could say this, I used to have like 5 different applications to communicate with my youth. Some of them didn't like Facebook. They like Slack. They like this. And I used to copy the same message into 5 across, because you have to learn how to communicate with people individually. And you have to find why they want to buy into your vision, not because you want them to, but because you have to find something within them that comes in and bridges that and says, hey, come over to my group, because there's something for you as well. I mean, like, look at this, right? Like, in terms of everything that I've done here in the community, my job has nothing to do with that. Like, if I'm a community leader, like in my job, they don't even sometimes know that I do all this stuff. Like, they have no clue. And people in the community sometimes think whether I work for the hospital, because, they give me their shirt when I work with their events, or they say, oh, you help me, sister, you work for the attorney, right? And I would just say, yeah, I do, whatever. It doesn't really matter. So, being a community leader doesn't make me and my job. It's like 2 separate things. And this is just a passion, and just follow your passion and do it, but do it well. And if you don't want to do it, then, find something else, because not everybody is destined to be in this. That's why the world works, right? Not everybody's the same. And we have to learn to really learn from different people, no matter who they are. Like, I learn from my 12-year-old on a daily basis. I'll give you a quick example. I take this leadership class in my MBA class, right? And it's a powerful class. And I learn about the leadership style. And yes, I don't manage people in my job, because my job is very specialized. But I've learned that I am a leader here in my house, right? Like, if my son is not doing well in some area, I have to put those into place to kind of see what kind of constituent I'm going to have in him, so that I can get him to buy into the vision of, hey, this is where you want to get later. And I think that's one of the things that you have to understand, not because a lot of people sometimes are, you're too young, you don't know what you're talking about, but you learn from everybody you see. Like you, and also these relationships are so important because you never know who you're going to need help from. Like I could guarantee you that. You say that you don't need the help of the person that was sweeping the church outside. Let me tell you, you will. So respect everybody in every single way, and don't ever think that you're above anybody else, because that is what, and always be humble about what you do. You know, recognize that you have your talent, but to a certain extent.
And I love that. And I wish we can keep going, because this is only part of her story. And we really appreciate, like, you took the time to talk to us. And I would love to go to the audience questions. Let's start with Sharon. She said, I love that. It is our responsibility not only to educate, but become educated in everything that is possible. Education is power, and power brings people, and the circle keeps rolling. What would be your advice for people once interested can educate themselves in becoming more active in their community? That's one question. And what would be a good place to start locally?
I think you have to get involved yourself in something that you're passionate about, like maybe start there. Like joining, like there's a lot of different needs throughout the city, in any city. You know, there's always nonprofits that help. Maybe you join a board because you received help from that particular agency and you want to come and make a difference. And maybe you don't join a board because you can't join a board unless the board member kind of like, you know, says, you know, I recommend this person. But I would say begin by volunteering and not make it like a once a month kind of thing. It's like once in a blue moon, right? You have to be constant and you have to be there all the time so that they can take you seriously. So I would say, you know, start like where it's your passion that you like to volunteer. And then it'll evolve from that, because like you said, you're learning on an ongoing basis, right? Like I love going to volunteering in the soup kitchen. And with the Salvation Army, because I think that they're an amazing, you know, agency that do so much. And the lady that cooks the meals is by herself all the time, so she needs help. So I would say start somewhere like that, and then it'll continue to escalate.
Let's go to another question. If anybody else would like to ask, please put it in the chat. Let's go with Ada Martinez. I am also interested in how you initiated that. I would love to start that spark here in the youth in Charlotte. Like, what's your advice?
So I would say get a small group that think like you, because you don't need quantity, you need quality. And make sure that those people that are going to join you, like to begin with, you know, they are going to follow you, and that when, you know, you say we have to do this, they're not going to be too tired to do it, especially because, you know, when you're young, it's really different. You want to have your time. But I think the generations that are coming, you know, from what I've learned, they're very passionate about different things. They're passionate about, you know, it's not about the earning of the money. It's about, you know, what, you know, their values kind of like go together. It's not like in the past. So in your case, what I would say is surround yourself with a group of people. It can be 3 of you, you know, it could be 2 of you, and start with the different channels, just like I was telling the previous question, to kind of like start getting yourself involved. When they see you're getting yourself involved and you start forming those relationships, the rest of them will follow, because they'll be interested and they'll be like, what are you doing? How are you doing that? I really like what you're doing. And in Charlotte, there's so much opportunity. Like there is so much. Like I've worked in Charlotte, and believe me, the nonprofits, there's so many different, I mean, you can go on a nonprofit website and just kind of look at something that you want to start, and then start building those relationships with them, because they have internships as well. Like if you're in college and you have you want to do an internship, you know, you go to those places, they're desperate, because nonprofit agencies always, they will never turn down volunteers. And that's how you start building your network. And then, the youth will see you doing it. And then they'll look at you as a role model, but you have to be constant. It can't just be like one day, oh, I really want to do this. And then the next day, you're not going to do it. And you yourself have to be a role model. And that is hard too, because, you can't do certain things because people are going to criticize the one thing that you're doing wrong. So you have to always kind of like make sure that you check yourself as to what you're portraying and that you are embedding the whole persona that you're saying. And yeah, so that's what I would say.
We have another question. It said, what is Raytheon Technologies?
So Raytheon Technologies is an aerospace company and missile company that we provide anything that you can think of an airplane from the front to the back, including the engines, except the shell that comes from Boeing and Airbus. But we feel it's like, think of it as like your house, right? You have somebody comes and builds the shell, but then you get to put the bathrooms in and you get to pick, the bathtub that you want and the sink that you want. And basically that's what we sell, everything that you can think of for an airplane.
And thank you. And we have our last question. Is this any tips or networking? Now that COVID hit, it has been harder to get in touch with people, or at least it has been in my case. What's your advice?
One of those things is that there are a lot of groups out there that I still meet like on Zoom, because that's now they're a regular way of networking. Like on these boards that I said, people will do them on Zooms. Join definitely different groups. Like I know Charlotte has a lot of groups for youth that are like in college, for people that are under 25. And I think that getting yourself involved, like at least sending emails and seeing if you can be part of a group, and maybe it's just for leisure first, but then you start networking with different individuals based on your on what you are interested in.
Thank you. So we ran out of time, and there's a couple more questions. If people want to get in touch with you, do you want to give them where they can contact you?
Sure, you can always contact me at my email. My email is probably the best way. I used to be more on social media. I don't really have a lot of time for that. That's one of the things that I've stopped doing, because it takes a lot of time for me. But you can, I have my LinkedIn profile, Atalia Cardenas, or you can contact me in my email, which is my last name dot first name @gmail.com.
And if you're looking for her LinkedIn, it's also on our website, which you can see on the screen, virtualcollab.us. Thank you everybody for joining us. Please follow on all our socials. We'll have the monthly news now. Can't speak anymore. Monthly newsletter.